Hello world, welcome back to level 1. This is my third game dev video, and it's been 4 weeks since my last upload, so I hope you didn't miss me too much. In those 4 weeks, I've been very busy with work and study, but in my spare time, I still got to learn a bit more about game dev and art as well, because I realized how hard it is to make a fun and engaging game without knowing how to draw or handle the sprites. Because if you look at my previous 2 videos about me starting my game dev journey and creating my first game, I've only used very basic shapes, which are just circles, squares, triangle, and hexagon. So I thought for my second game, I should maybe try and create something more visually appealing. So just about a week ago, depending on when this video is uploaded, my favorite YouTube channel hosted their second game jam of 2020, and I decided to join and put to practice what I've learned in the past 4 weeks. If you don't know what a game jam is, it's basically a fun online event where a bunch of cool people get together and create a game in a set amount of time, revolving around a selected theme. And the theme for this game jam is Rewind, and I have 7 days to come up with an idea, draw all the arts, write all the code, and have a working playable game before the deadline. The theme Rewind was actually pretty hard for me to come up with fun ideas that would be easy enough for me to create in 7 days, and after a couple of hours of brainstorming, I came up with something similar to Gravity Fall, which is a really OG game. It brings back a lot of memories, and I'm sure you've played it before. So my idea was a game where the thing that can rewind was time. It's about the player who accidentally tripped and fell into the Time Lord's mouth, and then it really angered him and he now wants the player dead. And the Time Lord is a magical deity who can control time, pretty much. So the game is just about the player trying to survive in his mouth, and the Time Lord can reverse time and make things go backward and forwards. So the player will have to avoid the enemies and environmental hazards to survive. So this is the next day since the theme announcement, and I've already come up with a fun game idea. Now the next thing that most people would do would be to create a simple game prototype first without any graphics, but I thought I should do the complete opposite and create the artwork first because I would have more confidence to code the game properly, knowing how it would look like at the very end. And plus, the biggest reason is I couldn't wait to draw some pixel art after spending hours and hours learning about it. And if you're interested in pixel art as well, I do recommend Pixel Pete's and Mods because their videos really help me a lot to pick up the basics and get comfortable with drawing, and I'll link their YouTube channel in the description below. So yep, like I said, I plan to create this game in the pixel art style, and I'll probably stick with pixel art for my future games as well because it really reminds me of my childhood days of playing on a Game Boy, which were really good times, and I find it much easier to draw compared to things like this. So for the game, I quickly listed out a few things that I would need to draw: the wall tiles, the player, and the spikes, which are the essentials or the building blocks for the entire game. And I also decided to draw the art in 8x8 pixel format because I'm still very new to this, so I want to start off with a lower resolution first, and then move it up to 16x16, and then 32x32 in the future, hopefully. I started off by creating the tile sets for the game, and this is the first time drawing pixel art for me, so it took a really long time to draw and I don't really think I did a very good job at it. The way it's going to work for the tile sets is that I would draw these reusable blocks, which can be used over and over again to basically build any terrain or structure that I want. Next, I drew some spikes that will spawn on each platform level. This is basically our only enemy in the game. After I drew the spikes, I then drew some decorations as well to make the player feel a little less stressed, with a bit of grass, mushrooms, and bricks to set the mood. The happy mood, I mean. After I was done with the environment stuff, I then started to draw the player. I had a choice of choosing a human boy, human girl, an animal, or an object. I initially chose to draw a human girl as the main character because it's always about guys in many of the big games, but then I scrapped the idea because it was a little too hard to fit all the small details like the long hair and other stuff into an 8x8 while still making it look good, so I switched to draw a boy instead. Sorry girls. Once I was done, I did 3 simple animations for the character movement. So I did an idle animation where the character just bobs up and down, like he's breathing heavily trying to survive. And then a running animation, which is just his legs moving left and right, which was quite easy to do. And then a jumping animation where he sets his weight down and then releases. And finally a fall animation, which is just a still frame of him with his legs in the air. Because today's a Sunday, it's the only time during this game jam where I get the entire day to work on the game. So to finish up the art side of things, I drew the Time Lord's evil eyes, as well as a few of the UI elements like the rewind and fast forward buttons, which will become his nose. And for these buttons, I drew a normal version and a press down version. So this is day 2 of the jam and it's already 8 PM. I had a really long day at work, so I only have a few hours left to work on this jam. Since I didn't quite finish the artwork yesterday, I got back onto Sprite to draw the hearts for the players' lives, and also worked a bit more on the Time Lord's eyes. As you can see, I tried a few things to make the Time Lord look as evil as possible. Try to give him some eyebrows, jawline, and a few other things. But here in the end, I got rid of the eyebrows because he's a skull, and it wouldn't make any sense for a skull to have eyebrows. Next, I noticed that the color of the tile set and the color of the Time Lord just didn't match at all, so I decided to change the color palette for the tile set from the dirt and grass look to the exact same blue palette that I used for the Time Lord. I think it kinda worked better because it made the entire game look and feel so much colder and scarier. Next, it was time for me to actually start doing some code before I run out of time. I've never done anything like this before, so I don't know how long it'll take me to research and create a platformer game. So I created a blank 2D Unity project and imported all my artwork and set up my character animations, set up the tile palettes, and drew my scene. Once I had the background completed, I then added in the artwork for the Time Lord, his lovely nose, and tried to put in the platforms for the player to jump on. And this is when I realized I had some sizing issue. I think I drew the player a little too big and the platform's a little too big as well. But yeah, it's 2 AM now and I have to head to bed and leave it for tomorrow. It kinda sucked to leave the day like that, but hey, we still got like 5 days to finish this, so I'll see you tomorrow. This is day 3 of the jam. Just like yesterday, I only had a couple hours left to work on the game. So I had a problem yesterday where the platform blocks were really big compared to everything else. So I reduced the size of the character a little bit and also redrew the platforms separately so I can actually draw them a little bit thinner this time. Now that we have the platforms looking dank, next I worked on the code for player movements, which is just left, right and jump. The code for moving the player left and right was quite simple. I just used a rigid body 2D and the move position method, and that's pretty much it. And then for the jump, I did it by first checking if the player is grounded. If he's grounded, then he's allowed to jump. If not, then he's not allowed to jump. And to check if the player is grounded was quite simple. It was done by firing raycasts from each of his feet. If the raycast hits a platform, then he's grounded. If it didn't hit anything, then he's already jumped and should not be allowed to jump again. So yeah, the whole jumping mechanic took a bit of time adjusting the gravity, jump, thrust and other settings, but eventually I got it to work quite nicely. And then to finish off the jumping code, I added the ability to do a double jump, and that's it. Next, I moved on to program our only enemy in the game, which is the spikes that deals damage to the player if he lands on it. I'm not gonna go too much detail into the code because I think it's kinda boring, but basically I did it in a way that's quite different to how most tutorials would teach. I used a scriptable object to store the player's health. I think this method is really nice and keeps the code clean, and there's a really good talk by Ryan Hipple about this, and you should really check it out if you're interested. Links in the description. And to finish off the day, I reused the spikes as teeth for the Time Lord to make him look a little more terrifying. And that's all I had time for today. Gonna be back at it again tomorrow. Today I got home a bit early from work and did a bit more work on the UI and designed the hearts for the players' lives. So the player will basically have 5 lives in the game, just to keep it simple. After I drew the hearts in Sprite, I put them into Unity and then added some code to get rid of a heart every time the player gets damaged, or completely gets rid of all the hearts if he touches any of the teeth. At this point, I realized I was already halfway into the game jam, so I had to make a start on the procedural generation of the platforms, because I don't want to wait until the last minute to do this, as I have no clue how to do it. After spending about a couple hours on it, it turned out to be quite easy to implement. I can now generate a screen full of platform levels that are randomly placed with a minimum and a maximum distance between each level. I made it so that the smallest, longest, and the most dangerous platforms have a lower chance of spawning so that the game doesn't become too hard for players. Now I can randomly generate sets of platforms. I can say my game is halfway finished, and it's time to hit the sack. It's now day 5 of the jam, and I really have to get started on the actual rewind mechanic, otherwise I wouldn't fit the theme and I'll be disqualified. So basically, the game will start with a few platform sets already in the screen, stacked vertically. I then wrote a script to move all the platform sets on the screen up and down based on a random interval and speed. And I set an upper bound and a lower bound so that whenever a platform moves outside of these bounds, it will be destroyed and it creates a new set of platforms on the other end. It took me a while to get this to work, but hey, now I have a game that can generate its own platforms and can run indefinitely. And the cool thing that I like about it is that every set of platforms are always different and randomly laid out. And then just before the end of the day, I readjusted the platforms and the spikes to sort of make it a bit easier to play and also change the jump a little bit so that the player's jump is relative to the moving speed of the platforms. So if the platforms are moving up at a speed of 4, then the jump height would be 4 plus the jump power, and so on. So this is day 6 of the jam, and I think everything's been going really smoothly. What I did today was to finish off the UI side of things and add in some effects into the gameplay to really make it pop. Especially when every time the platform switches in direction and rewinds, I made sure that the Time Lord's nose is gonna be changed accordingly. It's now 1 AM and I have about 18 hours left to finish up the game. The main mechanics are basically done and it's playable, but it doesn't look very engaging, so I added some particle effects to a few different places. So I added particles for the Time Lord's eyes to make him look really cool, and particles for the rewind buttons, and particles for the player when he dies. I think they all look really cool, and gotta appreciate how useful and amazing the Unity particle system is, allowing us to create animated thingies in the game and make it come to life. Toward the end of the day, I started to panic a little bit and rushed some of the code and did them with bad practices because I still had things like the start screen and the death screen to do. So for the start screen, I just pretty much reused the Time Lord's face and his mouth and then added a simple button in the middle to start the game. And then I created a death screen that will come up when the player dies and ask if they want to play again. I know what you're thinking, the quality of the game is kind of dropping compared to when I first started, but hey, it's kind of running out of time, it's 2 AM and I'll see you tomorrow. Okie dokie, today was the last day I get to work on this jam, and there's only a few little things left to do. I added some sound effects into the game using BFXR, which is a free sound effects generator for games. So I did that real quick, and then I picked a nice background music from my friend's YouTube channel to put into the game, link in the description. I find that the really cool thing about game jams is that it allows you to explore different game ideas, implement the code, and then in the future, when I might need the same feature again, I can be like, hey, I've done this before, and just copy the code and reuse it. And at the same time, you get to learn and experience a whole project lifecycle completely, which is a really good way to learn in my opinion. So overall, the experience of making this game for my first game jam was actually pretty fun. I learned a lot about how other people make their games and going through the entire game development life cycle. And making a game is actually quite hard and challenging. I should have picked a simpler idea to keep it easy, but hey, I finished on time and it was a really cool learning experience. So thank you very much for sticking around and I'll see you next time.